Firstly, let's go over a theory that I've been seeing that I wanted to stop in its tracks. I mean, it's probably not gonna happen, because this video is probably gonna get like 6,000 views max, but either way, the identity of this little girl is 100% not Susie, the girl who goes on to possess Chica. Susie has been dead for a long time once the game takes place, being dead for over 50 years or so. So there is literally no possible way that this girl could be Susie. You may be thinking that she could be possessed by Susie, but we released her spirit in the Happiest Day minigame, and she has only possessed Chica as far as we've known. Some assume that the Happiest Day minigame takes place at the end of the timeline, however I don't think that's true. Considering how FNAF 3 was supposed to be the end, and that when FNAF 3 is over we get the good ending, to me that indicates that the Happiest Day minigame takes place in FNAF 3, especially considering how the simulated pizzeria FNAF 6 does not have to lure the original animatronics back to the pizzeria, meaning that they did not need to be released because, well, they had already been dealt with. So about this girl, let's go over some evidence about what we see on the poster. Firstly, there is her blonde hair. We know that it's blonde thanks to the rim lighting on the character being blonde at her hair, and while yes it may seem stupid, I think that the general consensus is that this girl is blonde. While rim lighting is the color of the light that it is instead of the color of the person, it also isn't going to be yellow on a darker surface, so this means that her hair is not black, eliminating Cassidy from the race. So this is not the spirit that was possessing Golden Freddy, or who a good amount of people consider the one you should not have killed, aka the vengeful spirit from Ultimate Custom Night. The girl in the middle is also wearing a jacket and what appears to be a denim skirt, fingerless gloves, white socks, and sneakers that light up Skechers style. Hashtag not sponsored, but like Skechers, hit me up, we can probably work something out. Now this may not be out of the ordinary to any of you, but this instantly reminded me of someone from a previous game. As I did mention this in another video, Elizabeth Afton. Okay, I get that she's been dead for longer than Susie, but just hear me out, okay? See, when we were playing Sister Location, we ended up getting the cutscene where Elizabeth is grabbed and killed by Baby, turning Baby's eye color from blue to green. This outfit that this mysterious girl is wearing is nearly identical to the one that Elizabeth was wearing in that minigame, aside from the light up shoes that wouldn't be available for another decade by real world standards. However, in FNAF in 1983, they also had discs that emitted sounds that altered the appearance of things in your brain. So a couple of light up shoes 10 years early doesn't really seem like that much of a stretch. The skirt is also identical to the skirt that Elizabeth wears in that cutscene, and the jacket could easily be covering up a similar styled shirt, which could be pushing the idea that Gregory having two stripes on his shirt is definitely important. But I want to talk about the color. You see, there is no real color on this girl. Bumping up the saturation, brightness, or vibrance actually shows that this girl is drawn in black and white. Have you ever heard of the saying, lack of evidence is sometimes itself evidence? Like maybe you're dealing with a professional killer, or that these thieves are overly cautious. Well, I think that this is a similar situation. Think about it. Why would they draw this girl in black and white? I mean, yeah, sure, she's backlit, but being backlit doesn't make you grayscale. This is an indication that the color of this girl's clothing can possibly mean something. Maybe Scott thought that he was too subtle with Gregory, only putting two stripes on his shirt, so this time he went for the full outfit including color. Speaking of color, there's also the matter of her shoes, the only part of her that isn't rimlit that has color. The color of her lights being purple and red. Purple obviously being a nod to William Afton, aka the Purple Guy, a character so synonymous with purple that I can't wear my favorite shirt on this channel now without being called a serial killer. And red, while misleading, actually does tie back to Elizabeth Afton in the form of Baby. Her entire outfit was red, including her bright red hair, and I mean, like, it seems fairly reasonable to assume that this girl has at least a connection to the Afton family, although there is another explanation for the red on her shoes. Give me a minute. Given that the other two humans on this screen, Vanny and Gregory, are also connected to the Aftons, we can guess that this is the case with the blonde girl as well. However, I don't think that the girl herself is Elizabeth. Here's the wow moment, alright? I think that this girl is possessed by Elizabeth. Yeah, I know, right? Hear me out. I know I said that that's not possible with Susie, but that's because we freed her, alright? There are 7 faces on the Blob, the secret antagonist of Security Breach. 4 of them have lit red eyes, and 2 of them don't. The 4 that do are Naked Endo, FNAF 1 Bonnie, FNAF 1 Chica, and Mangle, all of which are somehow present in some form or another in the Pizzaplex. Mangle is Roxy, Bonnie was Bonnie, Chica was Chica, and we fight multiple endos on multiple occasions. The 2 that aren't present, however, don't have their eyes lit up, Baby and the puppet. But we know that fire doesn't do anything to Remnant, clearly. I mean, Afton has burned, what, 3 times now, and none have stuck? And in another video, we determined that the spirits can only be freed when they get their unfinished business resolved, like the missing children in Happiest Day. Baby also doesn't seem too happy about burning in FNAF 6. She in fact says that she wants to make her daddy proud, and dying to fire would really do the opposite considering how many he's survived. So, much like we suspect Michael could have, Elizabeth could have swapped bodies as well into one of the missing children that Vanny took. Hell, that could have been why Vanny took them in the first place. Afton wanted his daughter to have a vessel, hence why this one looks so much like Elizabeth's original body. This also explains why there is red on her shoes, because it's meant to represent the glowing red eyes that would be in the animatronic head. Remember, it's damn hard to kill an Afton for good, and in the books, Baby is really the one orchestrating everything, at least when it comes to the Afton amalgamation. Especially since this girl is facing away, her eyes could also be green, and I have a feeling that throughout the game we will see her eyes either flip-flop or start off blue and become green or something like that. Or, what I think would be the coolest way to do this would be having her eyes green normally, like if we see it in like a camera or something, but be blue in a mirror. So, here's how I think the story went. After the FNAF 6 fire, William gets a hold of Vanny in order to get his body back. He creates through the company a new location on top of the old one to hide his deeds, and then he sets himself free. In the process though, he notices that his daughter's spirit is also stuck. Since this is the first time they've been together since he put her in the basement of sister location, he decides to help her out, and causes Vanny to start abducting kids who look like his in an effort to rebuild his former family. Given that his youngest son is either still possessing him or now loose to the elements as well, the blonde girl is then kidnapped and Elizabeth finds her suitable host, so she's possessed. And now she follows Vanessa around in an effort to keep an eye on her and remind her that Afton is always watching. She starts manipulating her through encoded chats and messages, and hacks the FNAF AR animatronics to cause them to malfunction, and gets Vanessa promoted to security guard to keep an even closer eye on her. As a part of her observations, she starts therapy just like Vanessa does, and despite her telling the truth about her family history, it doesn't line up with the girl that she's possessed. Hence the one therapist calling out Client 46 for it, and her explanation about what happened to her family seeming to lack emotion, since after all she watched it happen as Baby instead of experiencing it as an actual child. After the collapse, she is either brought back by Afton requesting help with himself, or possibly also to help secure the vessel for Crying Child, who escaped along with a Michael possessed Glamrock Freddy. To me, this seems like a game about reuniting with lost brothers, lost hope, but most of all, reuniting a family. The Afton family. After all, we have all the characters now. The misguided father whose misdeeds cost him everything, his loyal daughter who wants to see her family back, the mother who now agrees and is a part of the father's plan, even if unwillingly so, and the sons, one too scared to do anything, and the older brother who helps him beat the circle that their father created, who rights their wrongs and makes up for their family's sins. What do you think? I feel like I'm pretty spot on with this one, and that this could be a great launching point for the next part of the series, but let me know what you think down below. Firstly, we have to establish whether this would be something new, or if it would have been this way since the start, and there are a few indicators that might surprise you. In my latest playthrough, the security breach but it's ruined by mods video that released on Saturday, April 2nd on this channel, I made a note to point out that Freddy doesn't really seem to care when you get locked inside the Pizzaplex. He also seemed to care more about the fact that you got a crappy Mr. Hippo magnet as your free gift, and sounds more disappointed about that than the whole locked in and might get killed by a serial killer thing. Which begs the question, is he really all that disappointed? Obviously, if he was blatantly evil, he would have just turned us over to Vanessa, but if he was really crafty, he would gain our trust first. After all, he should have Glitch Trap's code inside him, right? Well, let's look at what he does before the doors close. He sends us to get a pass in order to free him from his green room, and then everything seems to go well. But then, for some random reason, without ever mentioning this before, he tells us that he senses we are broken and that he needs to bring us to medical so that we can get fixed up or something like that. Whether this was meant to be a nod to Crying Child or not doesn't matter in this case, okay? The point here is that it doesn't actually do anything. We get our run-in with Vanessa, that later gets turned into a TikTok meme, but other than that, we stay the same. We don't get healed, we don't get a band-aid, because we could have had it from the start. We get in that booth, instantly turn around, and move the curtain to peep outside and watch that scene. After that, Freddy doesn't mention how we're still broken, and I don't know about you, but me standing in a booth isn't really gonna heal me, okay? It seems odd if you ask me, especially since now with that little pit stop, even if you go full steam ahead making no stops, sprinting the whole time, you can't make it out of the doors. That one little interaction is the 30 seconds that we needed in order to escape out the front doors, but thanks to Freddy, now we don't make it. And you can't use his programming as an excuse for this either, because if we want to use programming as evidence, this man was supposed to be controlled by Afton's virus, and the glitching out should have messed him up. Plus, his coding isn't designed to scan children that are literally inside his body. If he picked up on the injury when Gregory was outside of his stomach for the first time and he was scanning us, why not take him to medical instantly, or as soon as you got out of the green room? And again, why make it seem like your coding is letting you scan a kid that's inside you, when nobody should be in there? Unless that's the point. What if Afton's virus did grab a hold of Freddy and just made everything seem like it was fine? Having an animatronic protect you and gaining the kid's trust is a lot better than just nabbing him out of nowhere. Plus, I mean, there would have been plenty of times this kid could have been gotten, particularly when Freddy gets grabbed by the Moondrop animatronic right outside of Parts and Service. You're telling me that Moondrop, the daycare attendant, told Vanessa that Freddy was in the Parts and Service room, but didn't mention that we were in the recharge station right next to Parts and Service? I mean, he knew, like he waved at us while taking Freddy away. But Vanessa knows that just grabbing Gregory won't accomplish Afton's true goal. So instead, what do? They stage a fake interrogation where Freddy once again looks like the good guy, and then she leaves through the most inconvenient way for her possible. Why would she leave to Rockstar Row when she could easily come our way and then head to the main atrium? That's where Gregory was. That's where all the animatronics have been spotting him. And then, after Vanessa leaves Freddy in Parts and Service so that his casing can be put on a new endo after corporate gives the go-ahead, she doesn't seem to be suspicious that he's walking around Rockstar Row. Like, who would have repaired him if not Gregory? There is literally no other living human in the Pizzaplex at this point, and the whole containment cylinder thing is so that it protects humans on the outside. Why is Vanessa so nonchalant about Freddy walking around? It was something that confused me in my first playthrough. I figured that Vanessa would just pull us out of Freddy if we got too close, but no. And a reasonable explanation to that is that she isn't sus because she knows the plan. And also, it's worth noting that Afton has spent all this time in a burnt down Pizzaplex that also contained his daughter, who has pulled this exact same scheme on us prior to this game, okay? So he could have picked up on it from her, either while they were burning, while she was trying to impress him, or maybe if she is controlling the blob and it's not actually Funtime Freddy. Just saying. And maybe I'm wrong about that, okay? It's entirely possible. I mean, after all of this, it is a FNAF game, right? Where not everything makes sense for the sake of the story that Scott wants to tell. But what about the post-game? What about after we supposedly end Afton? What then? Is Freddy on the up and up, or is there enough of Afton in there for us to be in danger? Well, it's actually a pretty interesting idea, since there is the distinct possibility that Afton is now controlling Freddy. Sure, when we haven't defeated Afton's body and he ends up possessing Freddy, we get killed instantly and Freddy gets purple eyes. However, in the actual ending to this boss fight, we supposedly stop Burn Trap. But then, the area around us starts collapsing. What if Afton was using Freddy as a means of escape when he knew that his situation was dire? I mean, honestly, if we think about this, Afton was downloading his consciousness wirelessly into Glamrock Freddy while we were fighting him. That was the whole point of the fight. But would it really reset to 0 once he stops and tries again? Or would it just be like pausing a download? Honestly, with the kind of buffoonery in this series, I don't think we can discount the possibility that Afton was simply just putting a pause on the download in an effort to eventually still take over Freddy and potentially spend time with his robot son. Or maybe just escape into the world once more. But like, seriously, he was transferring his consciousness into Glamrock Freddy by putting his hand on a monitor. And not even a monitor, like a dinosaur monitor at that. I don't think that we can like just go like, oh no, he's not in Freddy, he's dead, he's gone forever. That's no. If he can transfer his brain from an animatronic into another animatronic through touching a computer screen where he can see the guy, that's no. If you think that Afton's done, you have not been paying attention to this series at all. And if you think that Glamrock Freddy is safe, again, you don't know the series in the slightest. I hate that I was right about Freddy, because eventually it's gonna be revealed that he's evil. I know it.
Okay, so admittedly, Glamrock Freddy is my favorite character, and then probably Glamrock Chica, and then Vanny, then Gregory, but he ranks in the top at least because he is the protagonist, and that's just how that cookie crumbles. But speaking of cookies, can you eat them if you're a ghost? Perhaps not. Part of the reason why I was initially suspicious of Gregory being a ghost was his very mysterious origin. The Pizzaplex seems to have no records of him and is unable to locate his parents or even any trace of him in the system, implying he somehow, I guess, snuck into the Pizzaplex, or perhaps he is a victim that never left. I know we get that ending where Gregory is sleeping in the streets homeless, but don't worry, I'll be talking about that too and how I think that could actually play into my theory of Gregory being a ghost and possibly a victim of villainous and murderous animatronics. But more on that later. Getting back to those cookies, let's talk about them. Can you eat cookies or drink drinks if you're dead? Well, I personally do not think you can. The drinks and food wouldn't be able to be processed by your ghostly form, so it really wouldn't make sense for you to be able to. We've all seen what happens when someone like Slimer from Ghostbuster eats food. It kind of just goes right through him, and if anything, it turns into like slime or ectoplasm. You can't really like process it properly. It's pretty gross. Now, Gregory never seems to be compelled to eat, so we don't know for sure, but it also seems odd that you would be collecting so many tasty and limited edition drinks and food items without being able to eat them, which in this game, for some reason, you just can't do that. It's especially weird actually because when you play in Help Wanted, you can eat things, and that's like a VR game, so I don't understand how that all works. And throughout the course of the evening, Gregory doesn't even express that he is hungry, and that is a long time and a lot of running around to do and not to be hungry from. If you're alive, that is. Which, like I said, I really think this is more evidence that Gregory may no longer be considered as such. Spirits don't really have a need to get hungry as they don't have proper bods, so they don't need to like fuel them. They're just ghosty ghosts. They don't have physical forms, you know? Aside from not being able to eat, you also don't seem to feel much of any normal human pains. Gregory gets tired periodically from prolonged running and crawling in terms of his stamina bar, but he doesn't actually express getting tired in terms of like being sleepy. He's never like, oh my gosh, I'm like so tired. Okay, so like maybe when Moondrop is coming around trying to make you sleepy, but I don't know, that's some weird stuff. That's a thing that every time I talk about it, I'm like, I don't even know if this should be in this game. Considering how late Gregory is staying up for a normal human child, it's pretty odd that he doesn't ever express being like tired from staying up too late. Of course, if you're a robot, then the normal everyday pains experienced in human life wouldn't affect you. You don't need to sleep, so why would you get tired? Which, you know, he could also be an animatronic. Sure, we see him trying to sleep in an alley in one of the endings, but we don't actually hear him express feeling tired or ever see him fully asleep. So I'm thinking either animatronic or ghosty ghost. Take your pick. We're focusing on ghosts though in this theory, so let's get back to that. Right at the beginning of this game, I was pretty suspicious of Gregory when it came to him being a real living kid. Something was weird about him. He just, I don't know, there's something off about Gregory. I just look at him and I'm like, I don't know, what's up with you? Are you real? Are you a real boy? Right at the beginning, he generally just seemed to be too big to actually fit into Freddy's stomach cavity. Especially when you learn, at least initially, there was also a Fazwatch dispenser in there somehow. I know these stomachs are in theory possibly based off of Williams' designs, which were about capturing kids, or at least seemed to be from his sinister perspective. But in this game, even Glamrock Freddy seems to think Gregory moving around inside of him is dangerous, as that is an area that is really only meant to be large enough for moving things like birthday cakes and piñatas. I imagine even the piñatas would actually have to be really small though, because that cavity does not look big enough for a piñata to me. Also, I don't know about you, but I don't think I've ever seen a birthday cake for a kid's party that was large enough to be considered the size of a small child. Like, how big would that cake have to be for this to work? Like, he's have to be carrying around giant cakes in his stomach. Also, am I just not eating large enough cakes? Is that what is happening here? Am I missing out? Are people giving me tiny little like dinky cakes for my birthday? If that's the reality though, if I'm not just like getting tiny cakes and people are ripping me off on my birthday, I'm gonna be real sad. Even when I make cakes though, I don't make them that big. Let me know your thoughts about cake sizes down in the comments below. And let me know how big the biggest birthday cake you've ever seen or made in person was. Maybe there's something I'm missing out on here. Maybe I'm just not making or eating large enough cakes. Sweet, ginormous birthday cakes. Where are you? Another thing that seems odd is you never really wear the clothes that you collect. At least not as far as we can tell or see. Now they might increase your stats to just have them like in your inventory, but as far as we know, Gregory never puts those items on. Is this because he always has to remain in the outfit that he died in? Because, you know, he's a freaking ghost? Perhaps the only clothes he can wear are the ones he's already wearing. And I know what you're thinking, okay, but then what about the Faz Watch? Well, the Faz Watch could still be an item that Gregory could have equipped because it doesn't actually interfere with the ethereal clothes that he's already wearing. After all, the Faz Watch is more of an accessory really than like an outfit choice. Also, if my theory is right and he is a spooktacular spirit, it's also very likely that he's like a poltergeist who can interact with and hold objects in the real world, like the flashlight, the laser blaster, his Faz Watch, and other such items that he is able to use. Though even then, you don't typically see poltergeists put on physical clothing for some reason. Ghosts might be able to change their appearance, but usually not by physically dressing up. Like a sheet, I think that's the most I've ever seen ghosts wear. I feel like in Beetlejuice they wear sheets at one point, right? They're trying to scare everybody. But that's one piece. I feel like if you were to like have pants and like a shirt and shoes and socks and all that stuff, that's like a lot of clothing for you to have to like maintain a physical form to wear it. So I think it's just too much work for a ghost? I don't know. I would propose when it came to Gregory being a ghost at the Pizzaplex that he was a victim who went missing there. Perhaps that's why there are no records of him, because Afton had them wiped clean. I imagine he would find a way to do that for all of his victims here so that he could preserve his hunting ground. It also seems odd that Gregory has no relatives to speak of. The game leads us to believe this is because Gregory is homeless, and even possibly suggests that he or someone at least may have been living in the Pizzaplex prior to the events of Security Breach, with hidden alcoves where it looks like someone has been kind of like squatting and living. And with one of the endings showing Gregory living in a gutter, huddling under a newspaper for warmth. Is it also possible that Gregory would always be cold if he was a ghost? So could his seeking warmth in that ending also be a hint that he's no longer of this world? That might be a bit of a stretch, but it's still something to consider at least. I mean, ghosts are usually very cold. That's, you know, they say when a ghost passes through you feel like a chill. So I'm just saying it could be a connection. I know I'm stretching, but just come with me on this ghostly journey. Please, come with me. It'll be fun. Despite the fact that Security Breach seems to want us to think that Gregory is homeless, it's also possible that he simply can't remember his home. After all, for being homeless, he looks relatively well kept and well dressed. And who gave him that band-aid on his cheek, or where did he get it from if he doesn't have literally anyone around to look after him? Did he run away from home? Or is it that Gregory no longer remembers his home because his life was taken from him during a visit to the Pizzaplex, and now he basically haunts it, his soul trapped due to his unsolved murder and the traumatic nature of his death? Perhaps this experience was so traumatic that he doesn't even remember that he's dead, which is why he doesn't even try to communicate it to Freddy or even really reflect on it himself while alone. I think if he is a ghost, he doesn't really fully understand that himself. This could also imply why the real and true ending for this game has to be in defeating William Afton, aka Burn Trap. It could be that this is Gregory's unfinished business, and the ending we get if Vanny is redeemed with Vanessa, Freddy, and Gregory on the hill is actually symbolizing that they have all crossed over and now get to be together and at peace. After all, that whole like hill with the tree and everything, it definitely reminds me of the gravestones that we've seen before in FNAF, so to me it feels very like ghost vibes in my opinion. Of course, one theory we've been discussing on Top 10 Gaming for a while since before the release of Security Breach is that Gregory could actually be Crying Child. If so, this also kind of fits with our ghost theory. I mean, sure, Crying Child could be an animatronic replacement child who was like created after the original Crying Child child's death. Gregory could be a lifelike animatronic as such, but it's also possible that Gregory, if he is a ghost, is actually the spirit of crying child. Because although we have theories about where that spirit is, we've never really fully gotten any confirmation on those theories, I don't think. They're still kind of theories. Perhaps that is why he is so closely tied to the Pizzaplex, which was also built on top of the Freddy's location we manage in FNAF 6, Pizzeria Simulator, where it's believed all the souls were gathered as part of Henry's plot to finally defeat Afton and then set all his victims' souls free. And if you still aren't sure if Gregory is crying child or not, that's fine. I still say they have lots of similarities, but Gregory doesn't need to be crying child for him to also be a ghost. It just seems like another theoretical connection that supports the ghost theory that we're discussing here. Let us know your thoughts on this theory in the comments below. Do you support it? Do you have other evidence that you think makes it even more valid? Or do you very much think Gregory is just a normal, average child who's homeless and somehow got into the Pizzaplex without a ticket or a parent or a guardian? Do you think he could be crying child? And if so, is he crying child alive, dead, or animatronic?
Whether or not you agree with me about crying child though, I think we can all agree how good Minecraft is. And if you're one of the 141 million active Minecraft players and enjoy scary things, which if you're here I'm sure you do, you should check out our newest channel, Minecraft Nightmare, a new top 10 channel that's Minecraft all the time. And if you're like me and want more of the Cheese King in your life, which we should all strive for, I'll be over there too. And honestly, the whole Cheese King name actually came from when I was making my Minecraft account, so I'm super psyched for this channel. And if that channel can make it to 10,000 subscribers before the first video goes out, we'll have a very special live stream on this channel for all you loyal fans. Okay, now, let's do this. While I may have had prior bias to the idea that crying child is the vengeful spirit, aka the one you should not have killed, I really do want to get to the bottom of this, genuinely. So, when researching for Cassidy, I was keeping an open mind and using every source that I could. Multiple things stuck out to me as being commonly referred to as evidence for Cassidy. The final scene of Ultimate Custom Night where Golden Freddy is twitching after you beat 50-20 mode. The survival logbook, which seemingly contains conversations between crying child and Cassidy. The voice lines you can hear behind the mediocre melodies sound like a girl, like the ones that play slightly after the main mediocre melodies ones. And William actually killed Cassidy directly, as far as we can tell, whereas Michael put crying child in Fredbear's mouth. And these are some good points, and not something to discount. These are also the points that made me believe that Cassidy was the one you should not have killed originally as well. There's also the point that when the animatronics refer to the character as he, they're simply referring to the Golden Freddy animatronic, since Golden Freddy is a male character, as well as Cassidy's name containing the Cass prefix, which means curly-haired in Gaelic, and the character of Andrew, who represents the vengeful spirit in the Fazbear Fright story The Man in Room 1280, has curly black hair. There's also the two-eye theory from FNAF 3. The two-eye theory states that in the FNAF 3 bad ending, there are two eyes lit up in the head and the back, which we assume to be Golden Freddy to show that there are two souls inside the animatronic. I do have rebuttals for crying child points as well, alright, so don't worry, but I feel like it's important to not only talk about the evidence, but also give countering points to it as well. These are mostly coming from my brain, but after over 350 FNAF videos on my own, I feel like I am more than qualified to discuss this. The Golden Freddy final scene in Ultimate Custom Night can easily be explained away if you do believe the two souls theory, since if it was crying child in the suit as well, this would make sense. It could also be due to the fact that he was put in a coma by the Fredbear animatronic, which is a golden bear like Golden Freddy. The he pronoun being used to describe the vengeful spirit is a really hit to the Cassidy theory as well, since why would they be describing the gender of an animatronic when they're talking about the kid that died? Especially when, thanks to the mediocre melodies, we know that these animatronics are just saying the things that they're made to say by the one you should not have killed, meaning the spirit is really the one using these pronouns, so why wouldn't they use their own and instead use the animatronics? The voice lines sound like a girl because, well, they're voiced by a girl. The casting call on voices.com was very general and said that the actress could lean towards either a male or a female. The survival logbook having two spirits doesn't really have anything to do with Cassidy being a vengeful spirit, and the Cass prefix, while yes meaning curly haired in Gaelic, seems to me like a bit of a stretch. The whole name of Cassidy is Irish in origin and means the clever one. The origin of this name is also 65% Irish and only 5% Gaelic, meaning if we want to go off meaning, we should be going with the majority, which would be the clever one, which really doesn't do anything to help this theory. And the 2-eye theory has been debunked by us in the past in its own video and also on my Instagram in a reel. However, I'll go over it here. In an interview with Doco, Scott confirmed that while making FNAF 3, it was intended to be the finale, that there was no intended next game, meaning that at that point there were no other characters that could possess Golden Freddy. The lights being on in both eyes is simply because the light is bouncing off the inside of the head, and to show us that it actually is an animatronic head that was supposed to be Freddy, since if it was only one eye it could also kind of look like Bonnie. Or hell, if it's only one eye we would have thought that it was another Foxy. Now there is a lot more evidence for Crying Child in my opinion, okay? Whenever I asked others who thought that it was Cassidy why they thought it was Cassidy instead, they all ended up giving me the same points. That Cassidy was killed directly, the two souls theory, and the gender confusion of the animatronic. Typically, nothing additional was added, okay? I'm sorry, it's just how it went. So now let's go over some of the evidence I gathered for Crying Child's case. Cassidy was released in the Happiest Day minigame in FNAF 3, hence why the original animatronics don't appear in FNAF 6 when Henry is trying to put everything involving Fazbear Entertainment to rest. If Cassidy is at rest as well, she cannot be possessing William. The spirit possessing William also, from what we've seen in the games, cannot be possessing both him and the Golden Freddy animatronic. If he can possess multiple things, then the two souls theory helps explain that as well, despite two souls and multiple possessions coming out of seemingly nowhere as far as the games are concerned. As I said, the casting call also said whoever got the part could lean towards a male or a female voice. And considering how Tabitha Skanes, the actress who got the part, is female, it would make sense for her to lean towards a female voice. It's also worth noting that most prepubescent male characters have female voice actors. Danny Phantom, Timmy Turner, Ash Ketchum, all these characters have female voice actors because they're young, so the same would be the case for Crying Child. The appearance of the Nightmare animatronics in FNAF 4 as well also seems to be impossible unless the one creating that situation, the Vengeful Spirit, had seen them before. And since FNAF 4 was a dream, as confirmed by Ultimate Custom Night in lines like "This is a nightmare you won't wake from," Crying Child is the only one to have seen these animatronics. Crying Child also dies in a hospital after suffering through the agony of his coma nightmare, which would give him the power to latch onto something nearby, which would have most likely been his father. There's also weaker evidence like the fact that the image used for the Vengeful Spirit is just a blown out image of Scott's son, which could be a parallel to William's son. Andrew from the Man in Room 1280 is also a male, and while yes, Michael put Crying Child's head into the robot, William was the one who made the robot and also made it powerful enough to crush a skull, whereas a normal animatronic would be unable to do so, which is what Michael assumed would happen. He didn't think that it was going to kill his brother. Something that MapHat also agrees with. If, like some commenters have said, they only care about what he says and not the actual evidence. And while there is more evidence for Crying Child, there are also some things that don't have clean answers. The same is true for Cassidy. Cassidy might not have been released in the Happiest Day minigame, despite it seemingly being the case. The Nightmare animatronics also do appear in FNAF VR, which could have been due to the scanning of the hard drive that created Glitch Trap, who had seen the nightmares at this point, but it doesn't explain the fact that Michael drew Nightmare Fredbear in the survival logbook, unless this is something that he drew beforehand and then showed to Crying Child, hence why they showed up in his dreams, but that involves assumptions that I'm just not comfortable making. Crying Child does die in a hospital. However, while we haven't really seen proof that you can possess something far away in the games, we also technically haven't seen proof that says you can't. In my personal opinion, the lack of evidence is in and of itself evidence against that, but I guess I can see why others wouldn't be so quick to accept that. The same idea with possessing multiple things. The whole image being of Scott's son thing is kind of weak, but considering that the FNAF 4 home was also decorated with images of his family, I'd actually like to think that this is more important than we realize. Because sure, using his own assets is cheaper than buying them, but this seems very deliberate. If the images in the FNAF 4 home were supposed to be of William and his family, and they were of Scott's family, and then Scott's son is used for something else, yeah. but people will hone in on how that is circumstantial. The biggest rebuttal for Crying Child, however, is that William didn't kill him, Michael did. And since Crying Child is William's son, he wouldn't want to torture his dad. And while this can be true, we have to remember that Crying Child is again also a child, who most likely saw his sister get scooped by Baby, who got scared when he saw his father putting a worker into the Fredbear suit, and one of Scott's hints from that live stream oh so long ago was what is seen in shadows is often misunderstood in the mind of a child. Even without seeing William give the superpower he needed to the animatronic in order to make it a killbot, Crying Child knows that William is making killbots. He knows that he made Baby, and he knows that William made Fredbear. So getting killed by the animatronic wouldn't necessarily be Michael's fault, it would be William's. Much like how Elizabeth's death was his fault as well. And being family doesn't mean that you can't dislike or even hate those people, okay? Being related to you doesn't automatically give people a free pass for doing horrific acts. If my father was a serial killer who killed my little sister and then killed me using overpowered animatronics, you best believe I'm coming back with a vengeance. And also, just one final point in general, in that interview with Daco that is still available on Daco's channel, Scott said that FNAF 3 was intended to be the final game. This question is presented 21 minutes into the video if you want to actually look at the timecode, when asked about which ending of FNAF 3 is canon. However, Scott also refuses to answer that question, because he knows how passionate the community gets, and cites the argument over Mangle's gender as a reason why he won't answer it. He says that it's complicated. And to me, this sounds like it's because what people generally understand in this series would be countered by which ending is canon. The good ending would have released Cassidy's soul, which would in turn make it impossible for her to be the vengeful spirit, since that minigame was in fact not Crying Child, okay? He hadn't been introduced yet. And according to a recent community poll, which actually inspired this video, the generally accepted idea is that Cassidy is the vengeful spirit. So if he had countered that, everyone would have all been up in a tizzy, okay? This was also after Ultimate Custom Night had been released, so yeah. So there you have it, all the evidence for both sides of the argument as well as counters. After this, my ideas actually haven't changed, okay? I'm still sure that Crying Child is the vengeful spirit and that Cassidy was released alongside the other original missing children in FNAF 3's Happiest Day minigame. There's even more evidence for that point, okay? And basically every point for Cassidy can be countered, whereas for Crying Child there seems to be some that are definitely solid. Hopefully we can all be civil about this in the comments section, because I really tried my best to find the most information for both sides, but I don't think it's gonna happen. Whoever I asked about Cassidy, okay, either didn't respond, gave me the same points as the others, or just went on a rambling that made no sense. The timeline starts off with the 8-bit scene from Sister Location, where Emily gets grabbed by Baby. This seemingly occurs in 1983 before Crying Child is scared of the animatronics, since the most likely explanation for the stomach mouths we see on the Nightmare animatronics is due to this scene, which would also mean that this is why he was scared of them. Which would also mean that around this time the main Freddy Fazbear's Pizza location was closed, leaving Fredbear's Family Diner, the one we visit in FNAF 4's minigame, as the only Fazbear Entertainment restaurant standing, at least for now. Then we see the events of FNAF 4, where Crying Child gets crushed in Fredbear's skull, sending him to the hospital, where in a coma he fights off the Nightmare animatronics but ultimately succumbs and flatlines as we hear at the end of the game. However, something interesting happens when he does, something that his father William would not understand for a few years. While in the coma, these animatronics were torturing Crying Child, causing him severe emotional pain, and over the course of the week, this builds into agonizing torture, which reaches out and grabs hold of one of the things in his hospital room, his father. Over the next few years, Crying Child, through the eyes of his father, would watch the horrific acts he commits firsthand. First killing Charlotte, Henry's daughter, in November of that year, 1983. And then in 1985, at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's, complete with toy animatronics with facial recognition software, and seeing what his father was doing, and seeing that he was in fact the one who gave the Fredbear animatronic that took his life the power it needed to do so, Crying Child got angry, some would say vengeful, and decided that his father needed to suffer for his actions. Now quickly, let's go over why Crying Child is the vengeful spirit and not Cassidy like many people assume. Firstly, it makes more sense from a literary standpoint. Cassidy, other than being in Golden Freddy, has no literary significance. She wasn't the first victim, even out of the original 5. Those were Charlotte as the first victim and Susie of the first missing children's incident. Every reference to the one you should not have killed in Ultimate Custom Night also refers to a male, calling him he every time. And the possession of multiple vessels has not been present in the games at all. So if Cassidy is Golden Freddy, she could not be possessing William as well. Crying Child, on the other hand, couldn't possess Golden Freddy because he suffered his agony in the hospital. While yes, he was crushed by Fredbear, agony is defined as long-term physical or emotional pain. And while yes, getting your skull crushed would be extremely painful, he would pass out and be put in a coma quickly enough where he wouldn't really feel it. The agony comes from being tortured by nightmarish versions of the animatronics that he knows. It also links forward to how William sees the nightmare animatronics in Ultimate Custom Night, since if it was Cassidy, she would have no way of knowing what they looked like, since she didn't suffer the coma dream Crying Child did. Then comes Sister Location, a departure from my previous timeline. As William realizes that baby is possessed by Elizabeth, he sends a still grieving Michael down to learn the truth about how his little brother could still be revived, or I guess still be alive in a sense. Michael learns that his sister is still here inside baby, and that his brother may be alive too, as well as his father's other victims. So he sets out on a mission to find his father and right his wrongs and set those victims free. He gets hired at the FNAF 2 and 1 locations, which chronologically are the second and third Fazbear establishments. Michael works here in an effort to set the souls of the missing children free. However, is unable to do so because he gets fired for tampering with the animatronics and an odor. Possibly made up, possibly due to the damage that Ender did to his insides. Those locations also end up closing down, the latter one being due to the animatronics leaking mucus and blood. And the story of Fazbear Entertainment seemed to be complete, at least for the time. Since, unknown to Michael, his father was actually still alive. He was stuck in one of the secret rooms that was invisible to the animatronics, which gets opened and he gets released after Fazbear's Fright opens. Michael, hearing about this and knowing that it was his father, comes back to work as the night guard. Springtrap, being still kept alive by Crying Child, didn't lash out and instead recognizes that this new security guard is his son, hence the jump scare not really being a jump scare. At the time we thought that it was just lame, but now, with this timeline, it makes more sense. William wasn't killing Michael, he was just saying hello. Anyway, over the course of the 5 nights, Michael is haunted by the spirits of the original missing children, who he does end up freeing by ultimately giving them the party that they were originally attending. This is the only way to truly release a spirit, by ending their unfinished business. And Michael knows that now, but Henry doesn't. So on night 6, as Michael tries to free the soul of his father, and maybe his brother, he's not quite sure if he knows that Crying Child is possessing Michael, Henry lights the building on fire. Michael gets out, but Springtrap is caught inside. Unable to die, he emerges from the rubble and goes into hiding, knowing that both Henry and Michael are after him. Now, surely, Michael believes that fire is another way to set the spirits free, and maybe he thinks that's really what let them be free instead of their unfinished business. So, when he gets an alert that another Freddy Fazbear's Pizza place is opening, he knows what he has to do. While the job listing wasn't meant for him, Henry hires Michael and instructs him to bring in any animatronic appearing behind the restaurants at the end of every shift. Michael, of course, knowing the reason behind this, does so, bringing in Lefty, Molten Freddy, his scrapped sister Baby, and the even more mangled remains of his father, Scraptrap. Once again, the place is set ablaze by Henry, but Michael, believing that this is how they'd be free, sticks around, wanting to make sure that he's with his family again. But, as we now know, the fire doesn't work. Fire doesn't release their souls unless they want to be free. William falls into a coma, being badly damaged from the fire this time around, and Crying Child holds on to him, ensuring the suffering of a man who caused his death along with countless others. This is also where we find Ultimate Custom Night. Crying Child tortures his monster of a father with the various monsters he's seen through his eyes and his father's eyes over the past 40 years. The original animatronics, the fun times that were at the location that killed his sister, the toy animatronics, animatronics from this pizzeria, different versions of his father, and most importantly, the nightmare animatronics that tortured him while he was in this same situation. And the situation actually ended up causing a similar fate. The agony of being tortured, much like it did for Crying Child, allowed for William to reach out into the storage room surrounding him. He latched onto a hard drive that would later be scanned to create the Freddy Fazbear Virtual Experience, a VR game that the company was developing in an effort to repair their image, after paying a game developer to make some games making fun of their situation so that they could ultimately come back and seem like the good guys who care. But Then Afton's prey came along, a tester with a familiar name. Jeremy catches sight of Glitch Trap and goes mad, cutting off his face either due to possession or just sheer madness. Then the next tester comes along. They break the Glitch Trap anomaly into multiple pieces, stopping him from fully assembling. But before she can create the final tape, he gets a hold of her, using her to tell the next tester that there is in fact a way to stop him, but only so that they would reassemble the tapes and Afton could escape the game through someone he could truly control, instead of the partial control that he had over Tape Girl. Then along comes us, the player of FNAF VR, Vanessa A. We were pulled in when the last beta tester went AWOL. We test the game and try to get rid of Glitch Trap, only to get caught in his web. While our mind is occupied trying to destroy the anomaly through the complicated instructions that Tape Girl gives us, Glitch Trap seizes the opportunity and shuts us in our own mind, locking us away in the Princess Quest mobile game, which is later ported to a series of arcade cabinets. Then Vanessa starts making headway in the company, being moved to the Fazbear Funtime Service Department, where she helps take care of the animatronics being sent out to the homes of various families. However, these animatronics start to go crazy, attacking people for seemingly no reason. However, we now know the reason. It was us. Well, it was Glitch Trap through us, trying to restore his consciousness into his own body where he doesn't have to share space. He tried this with every animatronic he could until he gives up, figuring that the only way he can be brought back is through the original endoskeleton that held him in the first place. So, using his hacking skills, Vanessa gets promoted to the head security guard for the Freddy Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex, a location built right on top of the one that burned down only a few years ago. Another set of children go missing, 9 of them at least, which causes our player character of Gregory to investigate, but upon entering, Glamrock Freddy glitches out and we crawl inside. This location though has more going on here than we realize. With William Afton's old body in the basement, something he forces the Glamrock animatronics to dig up. However, doing so releases some other unseen forces, specifically his son Michael Afton's spirit, who now knows that the only way to set souls free is through their unfinished business, hence why everyone present at the simulated pizzeria fire is still kicking, including him. He knows what his unfinished business is though, his little brother. He still feels so overwhelmingly guilty for his brother's death and can't forgive himself. So when he finds Gregory hiding inside him, he promises to keep him safe and that they will make it through the night so that Gregory will make it home. But when Gregory is about to leave, he instead chooses to stay and put an end to the missing children, something that Michael believed his little brother would do. So they head to the basement and try to stop William, who successfully uploaded himself to his original body, be it with a couple of upgrades in the form of Glamrock Bonnie's arms and foot. They stop Burn Trap, but before Michael can go check to see if it's actually done, the cave starts collapsing, so he and Gregory escape through the tunnels. But Michael hasn't been set free yet, because while his unfinished business may have been his brother, now, after seeing his father back, he knows what he must do.